What's up, my little flowers? Welcome back to Hell, and welcome to a brand new video essay. The topic of debuting children in K-pop is one that has been commented on by almost every K-pop stan that has a social media account. Whether it's just a small tweet, a TikTok, or a full-length video, everyone has an opinion on this topic. The two biggest opinions that I personally see are either, number one, they don't believe that children should be debuting in K-pop, and they will usually have a cutoff age in mind. Or, number two, they believe that children have always debuted in K-pop, so it's only a problem now because people are jealous. Kids should be allowed to follow their dreams, right? However, I find through my research and my personal opinion, mixed in a little bit, that there's more nuance to the situation than many people will mention. Throughout this video essay, I plan on taking you on a trip of children debuting in media industries and the effects of these actions. I will be talking extensively about Hollywood, which is why it's in the title. And I realize that many of my viewers who are K-pop fans might be wondering why I'm looking at this from a more Western perspective. Well, the truth is that I often find that in many arguments, people will say that this is an issue specific to K-pop. Many people from the West will try to climb on a high horse and act like our entertainment industries never did this and don't continue to do it. I'll be taking you on a trip through Hollywood, both the acting and music spheres, and then taking a brief stop at Disney. After this, we will be discussing a popular industry here in the US called child beauty pageants, and finally, we will enter the K-pop sphere. I will discuss the environment of Korean communication culture and the history and problems with debuting children in K-pop. I hope everyone is buckled up and ready. Before we begin, I'll say a quick disclaimer. This is a topic that I actually know a decent bit about, and it's an important one to me. I work with children in my daily life, and I've taken every college course imaginable on the education of said children. I've also taken about 6 psychology courses, and 3 of those specified in the psychology of kids and adolescents. I'm by no means an expert on this topic just because I took a couple college courses, but I'm also not just another K-pop stan that talks out my ass about stuff that I don't know about. I know how children are supposed to be educated, what social skills they need to build, what stages they build those at, and what the effects of things like cyberbullying will do to them. So without further ado, let's jump into this video by starting off in the acting sphere of Hollywood. Before we're able to look at the ages of stars in Hollywood, we have to first define exactly what stardom is. Newsom writes in their article that, quote, King refers to stardom as an adaptive response to 3 conditions: the performer's natural physical appearance, the actor's on-screen constructed image, and the labor market, which encourages performers to merge their off-screen lives and on-screen images in order to develop a marketable persona. End quote. This is, of course, only one person's definition of what stardom is, but I think that it makes some good points, and many of these points are certainly something that we see in Hollywood and even beyond into K-pop. We can often see people in person or on the internet talking about a star's persona, both on-screen/stage versus off-screen/stage. This person is expected to be marketable and likable in both aspects. However, the article that I referenced also states that, quote, if adult stardom involves the intentional development of a stable persona, child stardom complicates this viewpoint. I argue that in contrast to the adult star, the child star persona is fundamentally unstable because the person changes too quickly and the on-screen image cannot adapt sufficiently. End quote. For example, how many times have we seen a child star get trapped into their cute, innocent image that was a part of their persona either on-screen or off-screen? The easiest, most likable, and easy to market persona of a young star is that they're a kid who's innocent, living their lives in a cute concept. However, eventually those child stars grow up, and they may no longer wish to be seen as the young child that they were at the beginning of their career. Nonetheless, the public's image of them does not change, and many companies will continue to market them in this way. They become, in all instances of the word, stuck. An example that's mentioned in this article is Shirley Temple. I don't know how many people know who she is, but she is one of, if not the most, famous child star to ever come out of Hollywood. The article states that, quote, on the one hand, Temple advances far in her 7-year child career, becoming not only 20th Century Fox's most important commodity, but a 20th century icon. On the other, she doesn't go far at all. Temple's career at Fox remains inert, a push-and-pull scenario in which the studio resists any significant change to the persona and formula it perfects, end quote. So now we have a small idea of what stardom is comprised of, and we can now recognize one of the problems of achieving stardom at a young age. However, is the problem of age in acting in Hollywood actually as common as many people might make it out to be? Yes, it is, and in Hollywood it affects female actors to an extreme degree over their male counterparts. Obviously, we know that in the K-pop industry, they are just as quick to debut a young boy as they are a young girl. But this information that I'll present you about the statistics in Hollywood can actually paint a good picture of what happens to older female stars, specifically actors, as they age. Lincoln and Allen write that, quote, film acting was one of the few elite occupations in which women were often paid as much as men. For example, 5 of the 10 highest paid film stars in 1938 were women. End quote. Therefore, it's a good field to study this phenomenon of aging. Quote, studies of ageism in television have found that television actors have become younger in the last 2 decades. End quote. This is a trend that continues to this day, although it may not be as widely known about. This is one of those instances that I was talking about, where fans of Hollywood products will either not talk about or genuinely not know that stars, on average, start at a younger age. I remember when I was younger, and some of my favorite TV shows, usually on the CW, that would take place in a high school or at a high school age were always played by actors that were significantly older. I still hear jokes about how an actor in a show is clearly 30 playing a 15-year-old. However, I've also noticed that many new shows set in high school, especially Netflix originals, will have children that are the actual age that their character is supposed to be. There are upsides and downsides to this fact. It is a positive thing that 13 or 14-year-olds will not have to look at a screen and see a version of what they feel they are supposed to look like, when in reality the actor is well into being an adult already. However, the downsides are basically all the main points I'm talking about this whole video. Now, let's further break down the ages of actors in Hollywood and their likelihood of getting a role. Quote, although 43% of Americans are over the age of 40, women over age 40 received only 24% of all female roles cast in television and film, while men over age 40 received 37% of all male roles. The Screen Actors Guild also noted that obtaining roles in feature films posed an even greater challenge for female actors over the age of 40. Clearly, the demand for actors diminishes as they age, especially if they are women. In fact, the term older is now popularly being used to describe male actors over the age of 40 and female actors over the age of 30. End quote. It's also important to notice that, quote, youth was the most powerful criterion for women who won the Best Actress award, while middle age was the best predictor for male Best Actor winners. It appears that a sort of revolving door for young female actors has developed, to the detriment of older female actors. End quote. And with that, our look at ageism in acting in Hollywood will come to an end. It's clear that actors' ages, especially female ones, are getting younger when they begin their career, and very few women in acting will be able to stay in it as they age, unless they are just extremely popular. But as they say, I guess that's just showbiz, darling. Surely the Hollywood music industry isn't as bad, right? Well, let me introduce you to one of the blueprints of female pop stars, a girl named Britney Spears. When I Google her name, this is one of the statements that come up about her debut. Quote, often referred to as the princess of pop, she is credited with influencing the revival of teen pop during the late 1990s and early 2000s. After appearing in stage productions and television series, Spears signed with Jive Records in 1997 at age 15, end quote. Britney was undoubtedly young when she began her career, and this left the door open for the problem that I previously described. A star who achieves such a high level of stardom at such a young age becomes fixed in that time that they became famous. They're never allowed to grow up, but there is also a weird dichotomy present where people want them to grow up super fast as well. I don't know how many of you are aware of these, but I've heard that a lot of famous underage singers often have had fans that count down the days until they turn 18. Olivia Rodrigo, another female singer who started when she was underage, had this happen to her, and I believe that Billie Eilish did as well. I'll go back to my example of Britney Spears for a little while. There was often this weird focus on her sexual life and thoughts. I've seen countless interviews, some from when she was still a minor, where she is asked all sorts of creepy questions. If any of you guys have watched a documentary on her, you might have seen these as well. Most of the time, the interviewers were middle-aged men who would ask her absolutely disgusting questions. At one point, there was this weird fascination on her virginity status, because I think that she had almost been forced to answer a question about it once. Ever since that question, she would constantly be asked, "Are you still a virgin?" Aside from the heinous way that she was treated, we also have to look at how much control she had in her early years. Obviously, many people know that she did not have any control during her conservatorship, but I'm not really talking about that today. I'm discussing how much control could a 16-year-old girl have on her own music. One article that I've read stated this: fans are understandably keen to attribute her with agency. She co-wrote some of the songs. She was also the product of an unbeatable machine. Jive A&R man Steve Lunt claimed that producer Max Martin said of Britney, "She's 15 years old. I can make the record I really want to make and use her qualities appropriately without her telling me what to do," as he told the Song Machine author John Seabrook. But were it not for Britney's suggestion to set the Baby One More Time video in a high school, who knows if it would have become a sensation. End quote. However, we all know that she grew up, and like I stated before, many artists do not want to stay trapped in the image that their child's self helped craft for them. If you were alive in the early 2000s, then you remember Britney's fall from grace. I was still young when it happened. I wasn't even a teenager yet, but I remember her clear mental health crisis being blasted on every magazine and TV network. Instead of being seen as a woman crying out for help, I remember her being painted by the media outlets as crazy, a wild child, and someone who could be made fun of rather than sympathized with. The article states that, quote, "This is where Britney's growth in the public eye ends, with her 2008 breakdown in the institution of the conservatorship that has restricted her life, run by her father Jamie. In the intervening years, Britney's evolution as a musician and a woman navigating her 30s has stalled." The article continues to go on and talk about the horrors of her conservatorship, but I won't be getting into that in this video. Instead, I'll leave it off with another quote that I think wraps it up pretty well. Quote, "Britney is a woman kept behind glass, frozen in time at the age of her first deviation from the script. It feels somehow personal, forever bound to her most visible mistake. It exposes the illusion of agency gained that we were sold. That evolution remains governed by proprietorial limits. Her denied potential is like an egregiously brutal conclusion of the planned obsolescence built into women's pop careers." Speaking of Britney Spears, she is sort of linked to our next stop, the Disney Channel. I think she was a child star on there for a while, if I remember correctly. Now, we're going to be discussing the Disney Channel, a little bit of Kids Bop, and tweens' purchasing powers and influence over the industry. Apparently, quote, "the category tween emerged in the early 1990s to identify a market graphic of young people between childhood and adolescence, who might otherwise be called pre-adolescents. The history of tweens coincides with a dramatic increase in children's purchasing power. Children directly spend tens of billions of dollars annually and influence as much as $200 billion in family spending. Therefore, adults are not the only people who hold considerable influence on the music market or entertainment industry. A large percentage of the consumers are children." One of the articles that looks at this states that, quote, "the expansion of the children's media industry is often understood by marketer media professionals as involving children growing older, younger. Not simply children adapting to a mature public sphere of consumption by growing older, younger. The broader consumer world also adapts itself to the increasing presence of children, becoming childish in notable ways." The aspect of children growing older, younger is definitely concerning, but I do agree that children or teenagers have a huge influence over pop culture. I mean, think about many of the top music acts or hit songs. A lot of these were originally children's TV stars, as we'll look further into. The grip that music that is geared towards a younger audience has on everyone is a bit insane. For example, quote, "Kids Bop became a major market force in its own right, when in 2005 and 2006 its albums cracked the top 10 in the all-around Billboard album sales charts, becoming the second and third best-selling albums in the country." If you're unfamiliar with what Kids Bop is, the way I remember it was that it was the current top hits that were supposed to be made appropriate for kids to listen to, but kid singers would also sing on the track. However, looking back on it, Kids Bop often chose odd things to remove and odd things to keep in. For example, all the cuss words would usually be removed, but the sexually suggestive line that follows, "strut my stuff and yes I flaunt it, goodies make the boys jump on it," is included unchanged in the 2005 Kids Bop version. I don't know how on earth that line made it past the board, but apparently it did. I don't know how someone cannot see a problem with children singing this line. I'm very much aware that children will listen to modern pop music. Growing up, I listened to all the top pop hits and sang along to some very questionable lines for someone my age at the time to be singing, but I never thought anything of it. I was a kid, and these were catchy songs that I enjoyed. However, if you're trying to market yourself as kid-friendly, and then having children sing lyrics like these for mass profit, I do think adults in the room have a responsibility to change sexually suggestive lyrics like that. Now, the Disney of my time would often do the exact opposite, and expected all their artists to be squeaky clean, even once they had become adults. Quote, "The Disney Channel and Disney's Hollywood Records label have produced 3 of the biggest music acts in the last few years. In 2006, the soundtrack of High School Musical was the top-selling album of the year, and the same year, Disney had another top 10 album, with the soundtrack to the Disney Channel sitcom Hannah Montana, about the everyday life of an 8th grade girl who lives a double life as a pop star. In 2007, Disney released popular follow-ups to both of these albums, and also introduced the Jonas Brothers, a pop rock group of 3 real-life brothers, although the TV tie-in came in later. Disney Channel stars were extremely popular, and not just with tweens, but in a mainstream audience as well. One article states that, quote, to the extent that Disney's music is childish, it is primarily through the absence of strong language or explicit sexuality, and in the age of the performers. Miley Cyrus, the Jonas Brothers, and the stars of High School Musical were 14 to 17 years old in 2007. They were kids when they debuted and started on the network. I do realize that kids acting in TV shows made for kids might not be able to be compared to kids debuting in K-pop on the surface. However, take a minute to look around and see how these kids were often actually treated or portrayed. Like, do I need to talk about the weird foot fetish thing going on over in some Nickelodeon shows? They had these children having their whole floor grippers out on national TV. If stuff like that isn't weird enough, then here's another example. Quote, Miley Cyrus did a photo shoot with Annie Leibovitz for Vanity Fair, in which she appeared without a top, although covered with a blanket, at age 15. The next year, at 16, Cyrus performed at the Teen Choice Awards in a revealing outfit and danced with a pole, which uncomfortable viewers interpreted as suggestive of a type of exotic dancing. And this is one of the responses at the time from the media. Quote, a comment from an editor at US Magazine in response to the TCA performance. She already has this risque image, so it really wasn't much of a stretch. That's how Britney Spears took off. She was the good girl gone bad, and it looks to be working for Miley as well. And this is a major problem in Hollywood, which was present before I was born, during my childhood, and even now. Teenage girls who make their debut in Hollywood can only be perceived as one of two things: a good girl who's godly and follows all the rules, or the stereotypical good girl gone bad. In my opinion, teen girls are often pushed into one of these boxes, even when it doesn't fit. For example, Britney Spears certainly did risque performances that I don't think that she should have been allowed to do at her age. But when she reached adulthood and started partying and dating and hanging out with friends, I don't think that is a good girl gone bad. It's just a girl growing up who has that whole experience blasted on national magazine covers. Someone has not gone bad when they suddenly start drinking or partying at an adult age. They're just growing up and being in their early 20s. The media and sometimes their fans still want to see them as the children that they debuted as, and when they don't eternally fit that mold, they get called a wild child. However, if they do try to maintain some image of purity, then the public will find a way to poke at that as well. For example, quote, at the VMAs in 2008, host Russell Brand, a British comedian whose act is intentionally vulgar and shocking, made fun of the Jonas Brothers' promise rings and ridiculed their abstinence. It's a little bit ungrateful, because they could literally have sex with any woman they wanted. They're just not gonna do it. Suggesting that the Jonas Brothers, rather than still being children, were individuals of an age that should be having sex. This type of stuff is completely out of pocket. For starters, no one's sex life is anyone's business, and things such as purity rings shouldn't be ridiculed. It's almost like these stars can't win no matter what they do. If they try to maintain a stereotypical good image, then they get picked on for not acting out more and for coming across as fake in some way. If they do try to break out of their old image and become an adult, then they're acting out, or they've lost their minds. Now, our leap into discussing child beauty pageants might seem a little weird, but I wanted to talk about them for a few reasons. One, they are a very big industry where I live, like huge. I had a friend group of about 5 to 6 people in high school, and 3 of them had all either been child models or participated in pageants as a kid. I also have fever dreams of that one TLC show about toddlers and tiaras. That show haunts me with how weird it was. Number 2, I think that it provides us a good chance to discuss the perception of innocence and parents living vicariously through their children. Now, an article that I found made some pretty decent points that I thought were important to share. Quote, within the myth of innocence, children are often portrayed as inhabiting a world that is untainted, magical, and utterly protected from the harshness of adult life. Innocence in this scenario not only erases the complexities of childhood and the range of experiences different children encounter, but it also offers an excuse for adults to evade responsibility for how children are firmly connected to and shaped by the social and cultural institutions run largely by adults. Innocence, in this instance, makes children invisible, except as projections of adult fantasies. Fantasies that allow adults to believe that children do not suffer from their greed, recklessness, pervasions of will and spirit, and that they are, in the final analysis, unaccountable. I brought this point up because I often see two discourses happening when children are brought up. Some people will say that they are innocent beings that must be protected and shielded from the media, such as certain TV, movies, music. While I certainly do agree that children should be protected and their childhood and childishness should try to be maintained during those years, just let kids be kids, I'm also able to see some flaws within that logic. As the quote points out, the idea of innocence hangs on the lie that we live in a perfect world with candy canes and lollipop roads, but that's not true. Children are smarter than a lot of adults will give them credit for. They take in the world around them or the homes that they live in, and those are almost never perfect. The idea of true innocence is a lie that many adults tell themselves in order to dodge accountability for their actions, as well as the world around them's actions. It's impossible for children to maintain an ignorance of the world when they literally just have to go to school and fear being shot every day where I live. Quote, in short, the discourse of innocence suggests a concern for all children, but often ignores or disparages the conditions under which many children are forced to live, especially children marginalized by class or race, who in effect are generally excluded from the privileging and protective invocation of innocence. The usual demonization and attack on kids in the public, suggesting they are responsible for society's ills, breaks down in this case as it becomes more difficult for adults to elude responsibility for what they do to their children, their own and others. Now, I want to discuss pageants because in a way they can be similar to what we are finally going to talk about next. K-pop. You might be asking, how are these two things similar at all? Well, they aren't the exact same, and they certainly have a lot of differences. I'm not trying to say that K-pop was inspired by child beauty pageants or anything like that. However, there are a few similarities that can be noticed. These are children who compete with one another based on visual, talent, and sometimes how they answer questions. They're also children who are made to look way older than they actually are and act that way too. If this doesn't scream Mnet survival show, then I don't know what does. All we need to do is repeat a part of the pageant 15 times, evil edit someone, and have a favorite who we want to win. So let's discuss these pageants and why I absolutely hate them. Quote, it's estimated that more than 3,000 pageants a year are held in the United States in which more than 100,000 children under the age of 12 compete. Pageants are a lucrative business. Promoters market pleasure and rake in big dividends, with some making as much as $100,000 on each event. In addition, child beauty pageants have produced a number of support industries, including costume designers, grooming consultants, interview coaches, photographers, and publishers, not to mention the cosmetics, weight reduction, and other beauty aid industries. Trade magazines such as Pageant Life, which has a circulation of 60,000, offer their readers a range of images and advertisements celebrating ideals of femininity, glamour, and beauty while marketing young girls in the image of adult drives and desires. In some cases, parents invest big money for makeup artists, hairstylists, and coaches to teach prepubescent kids particular modeling styles and tornado spins. A story that appeared in Life in 1994 featuring Blair, an 11-year-old seasoned beauty pageant performer, documented this trend. Blair's fortunes at winning got better when her mom and dad hired Tony, a voice coach and makeup artist who charges $40 an hour, to completely redesign her. When Blair's father was asked why he was so involved with entering Blair in child beauty pageants, he answered, I'm a plastic surgeon, only from the neck up. I enjoy the beauty of the face. No doubt that's why I am so involved with Blair. The article reports that Bruce is captivated by his daughter's beauty, but prefers it enhanced. He apologizes to strangers when she's not wearing makeup. Some parents have accused Bruce of enhancing Blair's looks with surgery. Blair indicates that she loves pageants, which are her only interest. The article ends by pointing out that Blair lacks a child's spontaneity and then conjectures that she shows so little offstage emotion because she's so busy editing herself with adults. I don't feel like I need to explain why this kind of stuff is wrong. I mean, I don't know many people that would agree that teaching children, some literally not even a year old, that their appearance needs to be drastically changed in order to be seen as beautiful by a panel of old-ass judges. These are children who are taught that they are ugly and losers if they don't want to fit to normal beauty standards, and I really don't even want to get into what goes through those kind of parents' heads. I mean, I understand wanting your child to have an extracurricular activity that they enjoy taking part in. That's a healthy part of growing up, figuring out who you are. But a 2-year-old isn't really capable of understanding what pageants outfits are, or the implications of them. And it's not just the makeup or the hair, because while I do not think that you should encourage a 4-year-old to get professional level makeup done, I do understand that some kids are really intrigued by makeup at a young age. I think I started wearing makeup to school when I was 10 or 11. Do keep in mind that this was like a mascara and a lip gloss. I was not turning out a whole look at that age. But what I worry the most about within these industries is self-image, especially in categories like weight, that can lead to serious mental health concerns for the child later in life. One magazine even gushes that contestants may enter a particular pageant for the fee of only $1 per pound. I also worry about the language that people will use to defend this industry. They will often use words directly related to self-esteem, such as, "These competitions are going to help her build character," or "Children that compete in pageants turn into well-mannered, beautiful ladies in the future." There's a certain irony in appropriating the language of self-esteem to defend child beauty pageants, especially since the latter provide young children with the standards of beauty that one of 40,000 young women will actually meet. Once again, little is said about what children are actually learning in pageants, how a child might see herself and mediate her relationship to society when her sense of self-worth is defined largely through a notion of beauty that's one-dimensional and demeaning. Nor does there seem to be much self-reflection on the part of the parents and other pageant participators in allowing children to be sponsored by corporations. The pedagogical message that often informs such relations is that the identities of the young girls who enter the pageants become meaningful only when tied to the logic of the market. What a young girl learns in this case is that in order to enter the contest, she must represent someone other than herself. Now, before we leave this topic, I do think that one final argument in favor of pageants can actually be discussed, because I can see the logic behind it. I still wouldn't let any child I knew within 10 miles of a pageant, but I do get this angle in a way. It's been argued that popular cultural forms such as the beauty pageant offer a way for the working class girls to escape the limiting discourses and ideologies found in schools and other regulating institutions. Popular culture becomes a realm of fantasy, offering the promise of escape, possibility, and personal triumph. I can understand this logic. Things like pageants would offer a break from reality for a lower class or working class family. I mean, the likelihood of a child from a lower income family becoming a famous actor or model or getting to grace the covers of a magazine are slim to none. And these children might not be recognized for any achievements in school either, but the pageant would allow them to feel important and part of a community and have a glimpse of spotlight. Like I said, I don't agree with this being used as an excuse, but I do see the logic of this quite clearly. And finally, we have reached the section of the video that all my subscribers have been waiting for. I bet some of you guys probably just wanted me to hurry up and get to K-pop, right? It's alright, I can understand that. Now, let's talk about the age in the K-pop industry. As K-pop groups are becoming younger and younger, members in their early teens are no longer outliers. Idols aged 15 are so common that their age hardly receives attention anymore. Members aged 14 still raise some eyebrows, but have nonetheless grown common in the mainstream K-pop scene. Now, I know that this is not a new thing, trust me. I've been a fan of K-pop for a very long time. I've seen, personally, that this is not a new thing. Like, Boa debuted when she was 13, in the year 2000. That's not recent, in case you were wondering. However, it has become increasingly less common to debut an idol already in their 20s, regardless of their gender. No community has made me feel like an old hag more than K-pop idols debuting, and I'm still barely 22, which is extremely young in so many other places. Now more and more groups are debuting younger. But we should also take into account that more and more groups are debuting than ever before, with the recent huge spike in popularity for K-pop. However, I found an article that tries to explain this phenomenon. K-pop idols in their early teens are certainly not unprecedented, but I feel this trend has accelerated recently, partially due to trot audition programs, said Lee Gyutag, a professor of pop music and media studies at George Mason University, Korea. Many child contestants have appeared and gained popularity on trot audition shows, Lee continued. Since trot is mostly enjoyed by older generations, seeing children perform on such shows was like watching a cute talent show and wasn't uncomfortable to view. This spilled over to the K-pop scene. The idea of extremely young contestants became normalized, leading the public to grow more accepting of very young K-pop stars. The problem is, while trot programs expect them to perform like the children that they are, idol auditions require even those in their early teen years, to behave like professional K-pop artists. I'm not sure how appropriate it is for children to act way too mature for their age. So, a provided explanation for this tolerance and want to debut younger idols is a connection to trot programs. Now, I certainly do see this point and its contributions. However, I don't think it is the only reason that companies want to debut younger kids. There are many factors to that. Actually, too many to talk about in this video. You could say that for male idols, it's a way to prolong their careers before the inevitable military service peaks its head up, but I would argue that that rule doesn't apply to male foreign trainees. Trainees from Japan, Australia, America, etc. don't have to do that service, but they're still debuted at very young ages. Two of my favorite 4th gen boy groups are Enhypen and Treasure. Enhypen has Nikki, who is a Japanese member, but also the Maknae. He debuted extremely young. Treasure has a few more Japanese members, and some of them were actually older when they debuted, but others were also very much young. So where's the explanation for that one? Now, we can talk about an aspect of this that I actually know a lot about: education and effects on socialization. Idols in their early teens are in the midst of growing, during which they are supposed to be socialized through peer interaction at school and enjoy making childhood memories, said Ha. Debuting at such a young age usually means they miss out on such experiences. In the worst case, if they fail to succeed as celebrities, they are left with limited career options, since they've most likely missed a significant portion of their education due to idol activities. The isolation and lack of peer interaction are bound to affect a child's psychological development and coping mechanisms later as an adult. Even if they do rise to stardom, there's a high possibility that they'll find it difficult to handle their emotions or be resilient when faced with stress. They may also be greatly affected by hate comments, then become unable to cope and spiral into self-destructive behavior, which we've seen many celebrities do. The deprivation of socialization is a bigger issue than just skipping school. Now, if I had $1 for every idol I've heard say that they wished they would have debuted when they were older due to things like missing out on life milestones, I'd have a good amount of dollars. The first example that comes to mind is Blackpink. Now, Blackpink actually didn't debut extremely young, but some of them did train for an insane amount of time. The moment I'm thinking of is from their Netflix documentary, where I think Jennie says this, but I could be remembering completely wrong and it could be Rosé. But they say that they never got to enjoy things like a prom or just hanging out with their friends and getting to experience high school as a kid who makes mistakes. They contrasted this to Jisoo, who is the oldest member of the group, and she says that she was really grateful that she got to have some of those memories before she dedicated her life to debuting. Having peer interaction is such an important thing in a child's development. It sets them a level to know where they're at, and they don't feel this responsibility to act older than they are. It also teaches them how to better handle emotions and communication with other people. How many of you had group projects in school? How many of you hated them and thought that they were pointless? Well, I certainly disliked them because I was super shy and would always get stuck doing the majority of the work. However, now as an adult, I still hate them, but I understand the purpose of them. If you've ever taken an education class in college, then you would know just how much they stress the importance of group projects, because it provides students the opportunity to have social interaction and to understand how to work with people their age in situations that they will encounter in the real world. If you've ever had a job, then you know that there are usually people who do less work than others, and things like group projects are meant to teach you how to communicate your feelings with people in a respectful way when you feel like they aren't doing their best. Now, let's talk about another topic relating to children debuting. Another factor that causes some to be concerned about very young idols is the shift in trends among K-pop girl groups. The demure, innocent image has fallen out of fashion, and female acts have moved on to portraying strong-minded, mature women, meaning young girl group members often have to present an overly mature or even sexualized image that doesn't suit their age, according to Professor Lee. And it's not necessarily about being scantily clad, continued Lee. What I find troubling is when idols in their early teens portray an identity that they're too young to comprehend. When I see very young stars sing dramatically emotional lyrics, I wonder if they really understand what they're singing about. Then their performance of the song ends up lacking depth. One of the typical criticisms towards K-pop is that it is a factory system. that the idols simply perform what their agencies have already created for them, he said. This stereotype would be further bolstered if more early teenagers continue to debut as K-pop idols and sing lyrics that they can't even relate to because they're too young. Of course, artists don't always have to sing about their direct experiences, but when the performer is too young, it's difficult to accept the music as wholly theirs. I brought up this quote because I think that it makes some good points that are rarely talked about when it comes to this topic. Obviously, children being dressed scantily clad, which just means like minimal clothing or sexualized clothing, if you didn't know. Obviously, that's a huge problem. Minors singing overly sexual lyrics in some of these songs is also obviously a huge problem. However, these are surface things that anyone can see and understand. But the article brings us a deeper point that's easier to miss. Underage idols may not fully understand the lyrics that they're singing, even when those lyrics are not problematic. Like I said, anyone can understand why a child singing sexual lyrics is bad, but can you see why a child singing about having a strong female empowerment vibe could be an issue? Now, I'm not saying that young girls shouldn't be allowed to sing about other strong women or that they can't believe in female empowerment. I would actually encourage young women to find a strong role model or embrace the female power ideology. However, the point is that their performance of songs like this can come across as halfway done, because they can't possibly fully understand the intended meanings behind some of these songs. This isn't me saying that young girls don't understand sexism, because trust me, they do. We're pretty much taught to recognize these things from birth. I'm saying that it's harder to believe a 12-year-old singing something like Fearless by LE SSERAFIM than it is a 24-year-old. At 12 years old, you don't even know who you fully are yet, and you constantly change so much during teenage years. I'm 22, and I've only recently started to get an idea of my place in the world and who I am and what I believe in. If I were to think of myself at even 18, I'm a completely different person. A lot of my likes and dislikes might be the same, but my convictions and understanding of things has dramatically changed. I would also say think about this point from a love song aspect, and it might be easier to understand what I'm saying. I wouldn't be able to believe a 14-year-old singing about true heartbreak and desperation and a powerful love. Again, I do know that kids this age date and fall in love, but they haven't dated for like 5 years and then broke up or lived with each other. I also want to mention that I do understand that children experience a lot, and depending on their home situations, they might be a lot more exposed to some emotions than their peers. I get that, and I was that way. That's why I could actually believe a minor singing about things like depression or family problems. Those kind of issues don't really have an age barrier. Now, I also want to discuss another aspect that's kind of relevant right now with Boys Planet just recently having finished. That is children on audition programs. The extremely young age range led to controversy from the first episode after a video of a subpar performance of a girl group Oh My Girls Nonstop by two hopefuls went viral on YouTube. However, the clip of the two girls being scolded by the show's judges stopped being funny to many viewers once they realized that the girls were just 14 and 15. Getting scolded by celebrity judges on national television and having clips of your embarrassing moments posted on the internet virtually forever is obviously incredibly traumatizing for children, said Professor Lim. I'd even say it's a form of emotional abuse committed under the name of show business. Those child contestants aren't being protected at all. No child should be allowed to go through such a traumatic experience. There should be a higher, perhaps legal, limit on the age of audition show contestants. How many of you have ever looked back at old videos you made? I have, and it's straight up cringe. If I have to watch myself on screen, I will actually start to convulse. Snapchat memories really haunts me, bringing up videos from when I was like 16 and giving me a notification for them. Now, imagine that, but on a national level. I do understand that older people can look back at videos of them when they were already adults and still cringe, but I don't know. Childhood cringe is just another type of power, especially if it's on national TV. There is no way that it is a positive experience on their mental state. Also, imagine those people who stop trying to be idols and start trying to get a regular job, and then their boss brings up those videos. Like, I don't know about Korea, but in the US, a digital footprint means a lot. I know someone who is a recruiter to vet incoming employees, and it's literally her job to look over their social medias. Now, we've talked about some cons that I feel are not commonly talked about in this discussion, so let's look at what to do. This article states that based on the current trend, I think the debut age for K-pop idols will continue to get younger and younger, Lim said. If we can't do anything about that, the second best thing management agencies must do is prepare a support system for their younger artists, socialization, and mental health. It's absolutely necessary for the idol's success, especially in the long run. If agencies sexualize young idols or present them in a way that's too mature for their age, consumers should also be able to discern and call out what's unsuitable, said critic Ha. Additionally, the idols themselves, as well as their parents and agencies, need to think deeply about what they'll do if their career doesn't take off. That's why they should never neglect education, even if they dream of K-pop stardom from a young age. Overall, I would agree that I don't think that young idols are going anywhere. Some of the most successful idols in the industry's histories have debuted young and spent even more years before that training. So instead of just saying no more minors in K-pop, we actually need to be looking at ways to help the ones that are already there. If we're discussing my personal opinion, then I think there should be a firm security system placed for these young trainees and idols. Like the quote stated, I also believe that their education should come first. I often see trainees spill this narrative of dropping out of school in order to be successful idols, but please don't do that. I mentally sigh every time I hear that. Teenagers should be taking history and math classes, not classes in how to talk to cameras or answer questions. Education is so important, whether they debut or not. They could fall back on their education if they don't make it, or if they do make it, then having an idol who's educated is never a bad thing and could serve as a good example for their fans. I also think that there should be a set number of hours that these kids can work or practice. I know that award shows and TV makes minors go home after like a certain curfew time, but that's just so it's not on TV. Like, hey, look, we're putting the children to bed. We care about them. But in actuality, being an idol is a lot more time than that. It includes practice time, and I would bet a lot of money that plenty of companies encourage trainees to stay up until like 3 or 4 a.m. practicing. They need sleep for their brains to develop, and I'll be honest, practice does help 100%, but if you perform tired, then it just cancels out all of the practice that you did. I would also agree with the quote by saying that any sexualization of minors needs to be called out immediately. I don't want to see any companies or CEOs or even fans making excuses like, they aren't being sexualized, it's you that sees them that way. My brother in Christ, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that these outfits and lyrics are not okay, when even I would be uncomfortable singing them in front of people at my grown age. Finally, I would also say that there should also be a way to ensure that these kids are surrounded by people who want to take care of them and genuinely have good intentions for them. They don't look at a child and see money, but rather they see a kid's dream and want to help make it a reality in a safe manner. Sadly, this is a difficult thing to ensure in every country and even outside of celebrity jobs. This is a difficult thing to ensure even in the real world with non-famous children. However, that doesn't mean that we should give up on it. It's everyone's job, not just when it comes to K-pop, but in day-to-day life as well, to make sure that we create the best possible environment that we can for all children to grow up in. We should do this for the benefit of all children as well as for the benefit of us, whether it's giving someone else the love and care that your child self never got, or helping to create an environment where current children will grow up with hope for humanity and work to better society even more than their previous generations. It's all a circle, and we reap what we sow. So don't complain if you don't like a younger generation's outlook. Instead, ask yourself how they got there, and what actions can we take to help make a better future. This has been my video looking at children debuting in Hollywood, K-pop, and more. I hope you've all enjoyed it, and until next time, please take care of yourself. Bye.